thank our sponsor, ESPN Deportes, who is not only our sponsor, but came in very quickly and very late, and we're very grateful for their sponsorship. And they came in because of the Herculean work of my colleague, Ileana Limon Romero, who joined us only in March after we had already started filming Fernandomania, but she's become a central part of this project and an essential one. In fact, just making this event happen tonight in concert with our events team, it was like Fernando in April of 1981 putting the Dodgers on her back and bringing us all tonight. So I really want to thank her. Wonderful work, Ileana. I'd also like to thank somebody who's not here tonight, the founder and editor of our Latinx newsletter, Fidel Martinez, and I'll tell you why I'm introducing Fidel here. Is last August, Beto Duran, very well-known sports personality in Los Angeles, and Fidel reached out to me to let me know that we had missed the 40th anniversary of Fernando Valenzuela's debut as a Dodger. If you'll remember, actually happened in 1980, and it was a very stirring debut. And we were determined, we acknowledged that we had missed the boat here, that this was a really important anniversary, but we also knew that we had a second bigger bite at the apple here, and we weren't going to miss out on that. So with the video team led by Eric Himmelsbach and Mark Potts, we decided to put together this really epic project that we're really proud of, that really began in the late summer of 2020. And you're going to be the beneficiaries of seeing it today, and we really thank you for joining us tonight. And I'd like to introduce the voice, the literal voice of this documentary of Fernandomania at 40, Gustavo Arellano. Gustavo?
All right. Hello, hello. Thank you. Hello, boom, boom. Okay, here we go. Thank you all. You are the real Dodgers fans, not these fake ones who are watching the Raiders and the Chargers playing. By the way, the score is 14-0, Chargers. There you go, Raiders. My name's Gustavo Arellano. Thank you all for being here. I'm a columnist for Los Angeles Times. I'm also the host of the Times' daily news podcast called The Times. And for the purposes of tonight, I am the host and narrator of Fernandomania at 40. How many of you have watched it already? Yes? No? Awesome. A lot of you. Thank you so much. And those of you who haven't, if you have your ticket tonight, you have a QR code, you could flash it there, and it takes you directly to the website on YouTube, Fernandomania at 40, free. Unlike the LA Times, you do have to pay for the LA Times, but you should anyways. But an amazing, honestly, I'm not saying this just because I'm the narrator. It really is an amazing documentary that not just crystallizes what the phenomenon was of Fernando Valenzuela, not just in 1981, but in all the decades afterwards, but also the story behind it, the controversy, the little-known histories, the culture, the different sports, the need for LA to have a sports hero, a Dodgers hero, the way they hadn't since Sandy Koufax. So tonight, we're going to air some of the clips, the opener and then the closer for Fernandomania at 40. We're going to have some panels with some pretty cool people. And then we're going to take your questions from the audience. So somewhere around there, these lights are very bright, so I don't know, can't see too much. But somewhere out there, you'll have a card, a chance to be able, there's all you wonderful people. You'll be able to ask questions, submit it in, and we'll go forth and all that good stuff. But anyways, enough about me. Let's get to the first panel tonight. So if the first panelist can, actually, I'll just introduce them one by one. We're going to start off, of course, with one of the two amazing voices that the Dodgers have had in their history here. Spanish language broadcaster Jaime Jarrin, Hall of Famer. This past week just announced that he's going to retire because he's had a good run, 64 years. 2022 is going to be his final season. So Don Jaime, if you could come up to the stage, please. Thank you so much. it's not Jaime Jarrin night, but just to give you the sense of how amazing this man was. Backstage, we weren't talking about the Dodgers. We were talking about how was Lyndon Johnson really as much of an ordinary person as he was? Because Jaime was there when Lyndon gave over part of what's now El Paso to the United States. But nerding out. Second guest, one of the great chroniclers of Latino baseball in Southern California, author of multiple books, articles. He's been a guest for us to do this. You see him on this, ¿cómo se dice? This documentary, Dr. Richard Santillan. So round of applause for Dr. Richard Santillan. Ahí está. By all of his books, they tell you the stories of, we're talking about Latino baseball way before the Dodgers, in the 20s, the 30s, all across East LA, into La Habra. I'm thinking of Jesse Flores, the famous Major League Baseball scout, and so many other things. And finally, we have a great compa, literally, that's the best way to call him, a compa, Fernando Valenzuela. Ray Lara, please, if you could come up on stage. Awesome stories about Fernando and all of that. So we got 22. So if we're talking about Fernandomania, this amazing, magical year, not even a season, a year, 1981, we have to start on opening day. That is, of course, Fernando had already made a mark for himself as a pitcher in 1980. He had pitched a couple games in September. But opening day, that's when the legend starts happening. So I'm going to ask all of you, just tell us your memories of opening day 1981 with Fernando, and we'll start, of course, with Don Jaime.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank for this invitation. It's a great honor for me to be part of this panel, and we're going to talk about one year that was an unbelievable year. Probably the highest part of my 63 years with the Dodgers. Every time I turn back the clock and go back to 1981, I think I feel much younger. Because that year was an unbelievable year. Fernandomania started for me, not in 81. It started in 1980. Because Fernando came to the Dodgers while we were in Texas, in Houston. He came to the bullpen of the Dodgers. He didn't see action in Texas. From there, we went to Cincinnati. He wasn't used in Cincinnati. Then we went to Atlanta, Georgia. And he came for the first time to pitch in the major leagues. He faced Bruce Benedict, who was a catcher with the Atlanta Braves, and he got a fly ball to center field. To me, Fernandomania started in 1980 because of those 4 games that we had at the end of the season. The Dodgers were behind the Astros by 3 games. We won those 3 games, and we tied with them. Fernando came in each one of those games. He won 1, he saved another 1, and in the other one, he didn't have anything to do with the results. So the Dodgers tied with the Astros at the end of the season, so we needed an extra game. And many people thought that Fernando should be starting that game.
Yes.
But I am with Tamila Sorda. I think it was asking too much to a kid who was then 19 years old to start a game that will decide the whole season. He had never started a game. So I think La Sorda was right. Goltz started the game. He couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
By the time Fernando came to relieve in the 6th inning, we were losing, I think, 6-0.
Yeah.
Goltz started the game. Then Burke Houghton came in, and he allowed 3 runs. Then Sutcliffe came in, he allowed 4 runs. We were behind 7-0 when Fernando came in, so he couldn't do anything, and we lost that game, and of course, we lost the chance to go to the World Series. That's when people realized how great Fernando was. In one of those games, when that girl came to the mound and kissed him,
Huh.
it was in 1980.
It was 1980, not 81.
No, 81. It was
Wow.
1980. The people went wild because in that series, Fernando was superb. Really, really, because as I say, he saved one game, he won another game there, and so then 81 started. He wasn't supposed to start the game. He was the number 3. It was Jerry Royce, number 1, Hutton, number 2, and Fernando, number 3, started on that game. But in the day of the game, Royce got hurt. So they asked Hutton to start the game, and he got hurt in practice. So it was Fernando. And you know what happened when Fernando came to the mound. The start that he had was unbelievable. 8 wins in a row, 5 by shutouts. No, it was unbelievable. That's the kind of people really got involved with this kid, 19 years old, little bit chubby, long hair, Indian, how to say?
Yaqui, like the Sonora.
Yeah, Yaqui features. Yaqui features, yeah. But he had a big heart. He had a, no. Fernando was only 19 years old. He will be 20 in December. So in November, I'm sorry.
Richard,
So,
you were in the stands on opening day. How was it?
Well, like Don Jaime said, I was there at his first game in 1980, Fernando's game, when he first came in. I had season tickets. I had bought season tickets in the top deck in 1977. So in 1981, when Fernando pitched that first game, it was so exciting. You could feel the electricity. Of course, people weren't expecting Fernando to pitch at that time, but he came in. And for that whole season, people were asking me for tickets. I said, I'm not going to give you any tickets. I'm going to go watch the game. But Fernando brought a lot of excitement in opening game. 1981 was an incredible season. I think by the middle of the season, I began to feel what African Americans must have felt when Jackie Robinson took the field in 1947. Because it was more than just a baseball game. Fernando was changing before our eyes the color of baseball. He was actually changing the language of baseball. He was changing baseball from a basically white middle-class game to a Latino, Spanish-speaking, immigrant, working class. And you could see it. Every game that he pitched, there would be almost 10,000 people who would come to Dodger Stadium standing in line to buy a ticket everywhere, not just in Dodger Stadium, but all over the country. He electrified this country, and what he did is that he put Latino, especially Mexican culture, at the heart of baseball in 1981.
Ray, what were your memories of opening day?
I was trying to sneak into the stadium. He told us, hey, listen, I can get tickets, but I think Tony DeMarco, his representative at the time,
his agent.
and people were going to use the tickets. So we said, okay. And so we tried, we weren't able to get in. So the first game we saw it on TV. But of course, we met with him afterwards.
How was Fernando afterwards? I mean, he wins opening day, wasn't even supposed to be the starter, and now sold out stadium, shutout. What was he? How was his feelings afterwards?
Like anything else. Oh well. Yeah. That guy has. He's the Iceman. He has no. Doesn't show emotion. Doesn't get excited. I've never ever seen him sweated, except one time we were in an earthquake up in Berkeley. It's the only time. Yeah, it's the only time we really panicked. But the guy never doesn't show any emotion. So yeah, he was excited that first that he got the start, and that he won. Not only did he win, he threw a shutout.
It was the first of a couple of shutouts to start the season. Jaime, at that point, 1981, you've been the broadcaster for the Dodgers. I'm bad at math. 58, 68, almost over 20 years. And yet most people in Southern California didn't know you unless they spoke Spanish and they listened to you. And definitely nationwide, most folks would not know who you are. But now the Dodgers ask you, can you be our translator? As Fernando becomes a nationwide phenomenon, well, we need someone who speaks Spanish. So now the nation also starts hearing about your story. So what were your memories being Fernando's translator?
Well, the charisma that he had was unbelievable. As I say, you know, he didn't show any emotions. Many people were thinking that probably he doesn't realize what's going on around him. No, he was so sharp. He is so intelligent. He knew exactly what was going on, and he knew how to cultivate people. Not only here in Los Angeles. I will tell you instances when we went to Chicago and to the Shea Stadium in New York. But being with Fernando helped me a lot in my career, because up to then I was very well known here in Southern California by the Spanish-speaking people. But thanks to Fernando, they start knowing who Jaime Jarrin was in New York, in St. Louis, in Atlanta, in other cities, because I was with him everywhere. At the beginning, when Fernando came on, the Dodgers asked Pepe Frias, a second baseman, to help him. He's from the Dominican Republic, to help him translating. He was doing fine. And some other times they asked Manny Mota to do it. But then one day, Fred Clare came to me and said, Jaime, we can't go bothering the players or the coaches to help Fernando. He needs help. Would you like to translate for him? That day, I became officially the first translator in the history of Major League Baseball.
Wow.
Never before me a ball player had somebody to help him. And Fred Clare came to me and said, Jaime, could you help us? You work for the Dodgers, you travel with the team, you are everywhere with us. Could you help Fernando? I said, fine, no problem. So that's how we became his translator. It was unbelievable how well he conducted himself, because it was tough questions from the press.
Oh, sure.
Many people thought that he was much, much older than he really is. And many people thought that he didn't know what was going on around him. They started questioning stupid questions to him, because we were about 3 months before on a strike. And they started asking him about the strike. He would say, what's that? I don't know nothing. The only advice that I gave to Fernando was, Fernando, you don't have to answer every single question they ask you. If you, for any reason, don't like this question, just very politely said, I'm sorry, I don't mind if I keep silence. I don't want it to answer this question. Next one, please. That's the only advice that I gave him. You don't have to answer every single question. And that's what he did. But most of the time, he answered everything that was asked to him. He was really unbelievable for a kid who was 19 years old, not much school, not much education, but he conducted himself beautifully.
Listo. Smart man. Richard, it surprises me in the way it doesn't, that Jaime would have been the first ever Spanish language translator in Major League Baseball. I mean, you already had stars, Latino stars in baseball, Luis Tiant with the Red Sox in the 70s, Roberto Clemente, of course, the late Roberto Clemente in the 60s. So you yourself, as a baseball fan, you know that history. You also know the history of how the Dodgers came to Los Angeles. And as the season comes along, are you surprised that more and more Latinos are getting so excited about Fernando, so excited about a Dodgers player?
Yeah. Fernandomania, Senor Jarrin right here was the voice of Fernandomania. He told the story every night when Fernando pitched. And there were literally millions and millions of people in this country. The Dodgers had more, as the season went on, the Dodgers were getting more affiliates in Spanish than English. In fact, more people were hearing Dodger games in Spanish than they were in English. Most people did not know even who Vin Scully was.
Let me tell you, in those days, the ratings for a radio station in Los Angeles, the English-speaking radio station, KMPC, KFI, those stations, the ratings were 3.2 at the most. Usually 2.5, 2.8. They had some 3.4. We at KTNQ had a rating of 8.6.
Listen to that.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, in 1981 and after is that there was a shift in the listening in terms of radio. And so one of the things that Don Jaime did is when he broadcast Fernando's games, there were literally millions of people in the Spanish-speaking world, not just in Los Angeles, not just in the United States, not just in Central America, not just Mexico, but throughout the Spanish-speaking world, throughout South America, were getting the feed of hearing Fernando. And what Jaime did was that he told, and I say this, I've been very lucky the last 6 months because I've been interviewing Don Jaime for a chapter on his career for a book. And so I've had a chance to talk with him. And one of the things that I find in the interviews is that he told Fernando's story, not as if he was calling a baseball game, but I call it that he was actually sharing with people, hard immigrant, working class Latinos, an immigrant story. It was like a novela. He was talking about Fernando because like many immigrants who came to this country, Fernando represented that. He didn't have any money. He didn't speak English, just like when you came from Ecuador. I mean, they were telling an immigrant story, and it resonated to millions and millions of people. And Mexican Americans who did not speak Spanish began trying to learn Spanish so they could begin to hear the Dodger games. With Jaime.
For sure.
And many Anglos tried to pick up the language.
They did.
I was invited to speak to the Spanish classes at UCLA, USC, Whittier College, Long Beach College, and some other universities, because everybody was trying to speak Spanish. What Fernando did in that regard is unbelievable. He was the best ambassador that Mexico had ever had. He was really, I can't describe what he did for our culture.
In the documentary, actually, there's a segment that I did not even know about this, about how Fernando was actually able to help the amnesty of 1986 come along because President Reagan, when the president of Mexico went to visit him, he wanted to meet Fernando. He wanted to meet Fernando. But you're going to have to see the documentary for that. Ray, you come from an interesting vantage point where you're seeing all this happen as a fan of the Dodgers, but also as someone who knows Fernando. So as the season's going along, you said opening day, Fernando was like, even keeled. As the season goes along, how is Fernando feeling? How is he dealing with all of this fame?
Day by day, he took it day by day. Like Jaime said, that he doesn't get excited, and he knew exactly what was going on around him. He knew those that were trying to get in with him, and so he just took it a day at a time. We were a lot more excited than he was, but because we saw the overall picture. We say, if this happens and this keeps going on, this guy has no idea where he's going right now. I mean, the impact he's having here. And one time I had to stop off at a market and said, wait in the car. And I ran in and got a 6-pack of Cokes. So I went and got a 6-pack, and he went in. And I couldn't get him out of the market because people, yeah, and things like that, Fernando, you can't do that. You can't do that. So he didn't realize it. And yeah, we had a hard time calling the manager about a picture, autograph, and yeah, and that went on for quite a while.
Yeah, well, even to this day, people know if you want to see Fernando in public, go to the golf course because he loves to golf. One final question, just short responses for everyone. Should Fernando Valenzuela be in the Hall of Fame? Jaime.
Of course. He should be there because what he did for baseball. He created more new baseball fans like any other player. People that were indifferent to baseball, coming even from Mexico, from Central America, from South America, some parts of the Caribbean. They became baseball addicts thanks to Fernando. I remember, in those days there was no social media, nothing except phone calls or letters. I was inundated by phone calls asking me about Fernando. And he created so many new baseball fans. It's unbelievable because here, the Anglo players, here the kids already start learning baseball at schools. But in Mexico, in South America, Central America, no. But they came and they used to call me. I have received, thank God, many accolades. But what really, really fills my heart is when I am walking on a street, going to a supermarket, going to the bank, or going to a restaurant, people approach me and they say, Mr. Jarrin, I want to thank you because thanks to you, I spend more time with my grandfather. He used to come with me to the patio, in the back of the house, to listen to you baseball. My father used to take me to the ballpark, and we couldn't go there. He will take me to another room to listen to the game, while my wife, my mother, was watching the telenovelas. So he said, thanks to you, I did that. So that really fills me more than any other thing, because I understand what was going on those days. And I am so glad, I am so pleased, I am so thankful to the God that He put me there, because those experiences that I had was unbelievable. The experience at the White House, for instance, was unbelievable. The experience at the Wrigley Field in Chicago was unbelievable. Oh, it was fantastic. Because of that, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. Even though he doesn't have the great numbers that some other Hall of Famers have, but what he did for baseball, nobody else did it. That's what really should count, considering him as a candidate for the Hall of Fame.
I mean, yeah, the Hall of Fame, we're not talking about who has the best stats. If that were the case, Barry Bonds would be in the Hall of Fame, and he's not going to the Hall of Fame. So, Richard, why should he be in the Hall of Fame? Quickly.
Oh, I think what Jaime just said is, I don't know if I mentioned this, but Fernando was the cultural earthquake. That's what 1981, it was. It shook up, it challenged the status quo of the invisibility of Latinos, both in the stands, in the playing field, in management. He changed all that, except for not managers, not in terms of ownership or front office. That's still a struggle that's still continuing. But in terms of Latinizing the fans and the playing and the game, you could see by the uniforms, the Spanish accents, there's more Mexican music, more food, more Spanish-speaking employees now at the ballparks, more baseball teams are broadcasting. Fernando's fingerprints are all over, and the shock waves of the earthquake can still be felt today. I said this on the very first show that we did, and that is that in many ways, I believe strongly that Fernando in many ways changed baseball more than Jackie Robinson, and that is not to diminish what Jackie Robinson did, but in many ways, Fernando changed it. We're still seeing his fingerprints on it. Yes, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and it is an injustice. It is an injustice that the Dodgers have not retired number 34.
Ray said it, not anyone else here. So just keep it at that. Ray, if Fernando does get into the Hall of Fame, is he going to be chill?
Yes. The best player in baseball is not in the Hall of Fame, Pete Rose. Because they said he gave baseball a black eye. Well, then inversely, what has Fernando done for baseball that if he doesn't have the numbers, look what he did for the sport.
Yeah.
So just that in itself, guy, look what you've done. I mean, you got invited to the White. He also got invited to go to see the Pope, but the Pope, there was an assassination attempt at that time. messed up a trip to the Vatican, but you know, he was going to be able to, go over there and see the Pope.
Just another reason not to kill the Pope, folks. You might meet Fernando that way. Jaime, Richard, Ray, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move along in our segment. I want to thank again ESPN Deportes for sponsoring this. Thank my bosses, Ileana and Chris, for doing this. We're now going to run the opening segment of Fernandomania at 40. It'll be about 9 minutes or so. Then we'll do another panel and all of that. So thank you all, folks.
Now we know, 40 years later, that people like Fernando come at certain times in baseball history.
He was an immigrant like many of the members of our families. He's not just a symbol to the Latino community, but he's a great pitcher.
Like Jackie Robinson, Fernando broke a glass ceiling.
Jerry Royce had been named the opening day starter for the Dodgers in 1981, but when he turned an ankle late in spring training, manager Tommy Lasorda turned to a 20-year-old rookie from Mexico, from Sonora. Fernando Valenzuela made it look easy. He shut out the Houston Astros on 5 hits, 2-0. On this day, April 9, 1981, Fernandomania was born. In the press, the stands, in Chavez Ravine, and all over Los Angeles. 1981 was a magical season for the lefty. He won the National League Cy Young Award and the Rookie of the Year, and helped the Dodgers beat the New York Yankees in the World Series 4-2. Fernando's impact on the Dodgers was huge, but that impact extended far beyond baseball. LA Latinos had someone to root for, finally, a reflection of themselves, and help them forget, or at least forgive a little bit, the events of 3 decades earlier. Back then, members of the communities of Palo Verde, Bishop, and La Loma, just north of downtown in Chavez Ravine, were forced from their homes. This happened after the government declared eminent domain in order to build public housing. The plan failed, but a few years later, that land was used as bait to bring the Brooklyn Dodgers into Los Angeles. Over the course of the 2021 baseball season, the Los Angeles Times will present Fernandomania at 40. This video series will recount Valenzuela's incredible rookie season, of course, but more crucially, we'll relive the perfect storm in Los Angeles that had been building for decades that set the stage for Fernando Valenzuela's improbable rise. Here's a preview of what you'll see.
The Dodgers came across as big robber barons. They took over this land, and the stories of families being pushed out of their homes and a lot of bad stuff kept coming up.
To me, it was just a big black eye in society. You know, it caused a lot of pain. Because of that, you know, a lot of the Mexican Americans, they said, hey, forget the Dodgers, we're done. We're not gonna go. We're never gonna step a foot in the new stadium.
When Mr. Walter Murray came to Los Angeles, he used to tell us, Jaime, when are you going to find and give us a Mexican Sandy Koufax? And I used to tell Mr. Murray, it's impossible to find another Koufax, not only in Mexico, any Latin country. So he wanted to have, you know, he realized that it was very, very important to please the Mexican community in Southern California.
All of a sudden, along comes Fernando right out of the blue, just changed everything.
When Fernando hit, it was just like, oh my God.
Here he is, man. Here's a Mexicano. You know, everybody loves a hero. Everybody wants to have a hero. Willie Mays, Hank Aaron. I mean, everybody wants to be the fan of somebody. And especially if he's of your racial background, my God, you know, vámonos, viva la raza, you know. So that's what Fernando brought. He brought an awareness and made us a little bit more prideful.
He made the Dodgers seem more relevant to all communities. It was easier to forget about people being shoved out of their homes when Fernando was winning games. That's a very shallow statement, but I think it's true.
Fernando was really key in bringing the hearts and minds of La Raza back to the stadium, or to the stadium, really for the first time.
When Fernando made it big, a lot of that, the guilt, a lot of that anger kind of dissipated, and people start coming back to Chavez Ravine.
Fernandomania just exploded. I mean, all of a sudden, everybody had to be at the Dodgers when Fernando, wherever he traveled throughout the United States.
It became, you had to go to the game. And literally, when the police would stop you, if Fernando was playing, they wouldn't say, "What are you doing?" They go, "Why aren't you at the park?" You know, because you were doing something wrong if you weren't at the baseball park.
It was like watching midnight mass on Christmas Eve, or, you know, it's hushed, sit, nobody talk, nobody move. Today we're pulling for the Mexican with Dodger blue on. But Dad, we have our Giants hats on. Shut up, put those away.
It was quite a vibe, okay? I remember my aunt, my tia Felipa, who loved the Dodgers and loved baseball, and she would always tune in to the Spanish language radio and then watch it on TV. She was so excited about Fernando. And I think that that's the same kind of sense and feeling that everyone had in the community. It was just an abundance of pride and a sense of feeling like he was part of your family.
When Fernando was pitching, was sold out. Then at home, I know that ladies, especially mothers and grandmothers, started praying and praying the rosary because Fernando was pitching that day. So he became God, really, in Southern California. It was unbelievable.
I remember driving home from rehearsal one evening, right? And the Dodgers are playing. I remember turning on my block, my windows are down, and you could hear every TV. You could hear the TVs. Everybody's on Channel 11, I believe it was, watching the Dodgers play, whoever it was. And you could just hear, you know, this enthusiasm of people, because Fernando was pitching.
I always loved the wind-up. When he was looking at the sky, he was looking at the heavens, at God for inspiration, for that little bit extra kick.
You are now there to see one person, the person that reflects you, right? The person that speaks for you in some way, right? There's something I think always about sports that has a character who is subversive, right? He's going to flip the whole script on what you've known or what you believe this sport to be. And this one seems more extreme because he's not tall, he's not blonde, he's not, you know, he's not Steve Garvey, right?
He was chubby. And, you know, in Spanish, we say gordito. He was a chubby guy, and the people could relate to him. I mean, he wasn't cut up, you know, and, weightlifter, athlete's body. He was a gordito, just like everybody else in East LA.
We really didn't know anything about him, and we wouldn't for years and years afterwards, because he didn't speak English. It was, you know, he was the kind of thing, you know, it was just, what you saw was what you got, but what you saw was just sensational.
Even a 19-year-old, you gotta be impressed with Fernando, that age, that composed he had at the mound. At that time, Fernando looked like he was in the major league for about 10 years, the way he handled himself.
It was a phenomenon unlike anything that I had seen up until that time. And even though pitchers from other countries came in and there was a lot of attention put to them, I don't think it had quite the same impact as it did in 1981 with Fernando. It was the right person, the right time with the right story, and everything seemed to break to present a whole new era of Los Angeles baseball.
There was an optimism, hope, and energy around that I think excited folks. The fact that, like Jackie Robinson, he also played at a very high level, kind of demonstrated to people, hey, there's talent in many communities.
When Fernando was with us, he's never gotten the credit that he deserves for the impact he made on baseball, not just on the Dodger organization, but on Mexican baseball, international baseball, the community.
I believe that Fernando will always be a hero to the Mexican-American community. People love him. To this day, they love him.
It's an LA story. I honestly believe that it's part of the history of Los Angeles. That's the impact that he had, not just on the Latino community, you know, but on Los Angeles. When he came in, he was like the guy.
So all of a sudden you have this sports figure who's not just a sports figure, he's a symbol of how you endure.
My name is Ileana Limon Romero. I'm the Deputy Sports Editor at the Los Angeles Times. I'm so honored that I got a chance to participate in bringing this project to life, and wanted to make sure that this finale celebration also helped celebrate the creators of this series, the people behind the camera, and the people behind the scenes, as well as our voice, our narrator. So I'd like to call them up to the stage and spend the next 10 minutes getting a little bit of the behind-the-scenes story of how the docuseries that hopefully you all have been watching has come together. So first, I'm going to ask Gustavo Arellano, our narrator, our voice. Please join us. And next, Eric Himmelsbach-Weinstein. He is senior video editor for us, and I've joked with him, he's the executive producer, you have many titles. This comes to life because of him. He had a very specific vision, and we are immensely grateful for what he brought to the table. So Eric, come on up.
Yeah.
I forced him to do this. I think he has been quick to push other voices and other people to the forefront, the amazing talent that you've seen that has told this behind-the-scenes story. But I really feel like Eric tapped into the voice of Los Angeles with this series, and we are grateful for that. So Eric, take us back to the beginning. How did this start?
Well, I had weekly meetings with Chris Stone, and I said to him one day, let's do a documentary on Donnie Moore of the Angels in 1986, because he had a tragic ending, and he cost the Angels the World Series with the Reds by giving up a home run with the Red Sox, and then he later killed himself. And Chris said, you know what, let's do Fernando's 40th anniversary of his rookie year. So that's how it started. And so I started doing research and watched some other documentaries that had been made. And I just felt like we wanted to tell the story from the point of view of the people who were impacted the most by it. And I didn't feel like I had seen that before that. And the only other thing I did want to say, it was originally going to be about Los Angeles in 1981. But once I started talking to people, the great talent that we had, no one really remembers that. So we focused a little bit more about their relationship to Fernando and to Los Angeles and to the Dodgers and how that changed in 1981.
So Gustavo, we joke that you have like 30 jobs at the Los Angeles Times and everywhere else. You are everywhere. You never say no to anything, but still, there are a lot of ways that you can spend your time. How did you first hear about this project, and what made you decide to come on board?
I think Eric and Mark Potts, they asked me, hey, you know, we're doing this series on Fernando at 40, Fernandomania, do you want to do it? I'm like, yeah, duh. I mean, I've written articles about it, and Fernando, I was 2 years old when Fernandomania happened, but you know, what Dr. Richard Santillan said earlier, I very much felt that earthquake. By the time I'm like, you know, I remember the 86 series, so I'm like 7 or 8, basically every young Latino boy, and not just Latinos, by the way, but I could only speak to my experience, Mexican-American boys in Southern California, all their dads are saying, pichea como Fernando, pitch like Fernando, not lancear como Fernando, pichea como Fernando, the whole thing, everything, like, all of that. So we would have contests. So, and Fernando, and he was amazing. I mean, through the 88 World Series and all that, he was just an icon for us. So it was, even though I'm not a Dodgers fan, I like the Dodgers, I'm not a Dodgers fan, I'm not an Angels fan, definitely not. But I've always been fond of the Dodgers because of that. I know all the players. All of my cousins, of course, are diehard fanatics. So when I heard that what Eric was going to do, I'm like, yes, of course, it'd be an honor to do so. So we did it over the course of like 4 or 5 shoots. We'd be right above Dodger Stadium in that area, Elijah Park. We filmed somewhere else. And then I was really excited. I mean, not that I wasn't excited doing this period, but when Univision said, can we do it like in 1 hour in Spanish, I was excited and terrified because I could speak Spanish, pero pocho pero mocho, you know, like whitewashed and totally butchered Spanish. But I was able to do it. My dad, at the end, my dad saw Univision, y le dije, papi, ¿cómo estuvo mi español? How was my Spanish? He's like, estuvo bien. It was good. Left it at that.
Excellent. So we're grateful that that came together. The reach of this has been immense. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and Grew up watching Fernando too and listening to Jaime Jarrin with my grandfather. So it extends all the way out, and before I was even hired, I'd heard about this project and was beyond excited about the opportunity to help tell that story in a really special way. So sounds great. Sounds like an amazing topic, great talent. During a pandemic, how'd that go, Eric?
Well, we had to shoot outside, and I do want to add that when we got together to tell the story, I wanted people from different walks of life. I wanted musicians, I wanted politicians, I didn't want baseball experts, I didn't want ex-athletes. We did have the obligatory journalists, we couldn't avoid that. But I just wanted to get just a broad swath of people that grew up here and really experienced that.
It goes back to what your original goal was, which tell the story of Los Angeles in 1981, and he did. And I'm not saying this just because he's a colleague of mine, but the series, what Eric did was awesome in terms of scripting everything. I mean, I told them, I knew that you had an amazing series and that you're just a smart, brilliant person when you pulled out Little Willie G from The Midnighters, the classic Chicano group of all times. What on earth is he doing in a documentary about the Dodgers? But you see Little Willie G, and he tells a story, and there's a personal connection to that. And I'm a sports nerd, but a lot of times when you tackle the story of Fernandomania, yeah, I mean, you'll have, of course, the origin stories, but the actual year itself, you focus a lot on the feats on the field, which totally makes sense. But it was more than that. It was so much more than that. And I think Eric just did an amazing job of scripting that out.
But I also want to add that this was the one project that I saw complete synergy within the newspaper, with marketing, with sports, with business, and our team. And Mark Potts was instrumental in getting this completed. And I think he deserves a round of applause, because he put it all together.
So Eric, what was the biggest surprise along the way? Because I feel like you had this vision, you researched it, you knew the story, you grew up in this area, so you just had all the feel for it, and you had these amazing voices that you connected with and reached out to. But what surprised you about it along the way? Anything stand out?
I didn't think the impact was actually greater than I could have imagined, honestly. And I think it made me feel like I talked to the right people. So I'm glad that I told their story, because I think it's important and it's evergreen, and it needs to be told. It always needs to be told, because that's the history of Los Angeles, like Gustavo was saying.
So Gustavo, help us put in perspective that impact. We have an amazing crowd here, obviously. We've had so many people. We can see the metrics online. We can see all the people who've engaged. But what has the reaction been for you, a person who's in the community all the time, pandemic or not? What have you heard? What feedback have you heard about it?
People love it. My dad saw it on Univision. He did not know the story of the displaced residents of Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde. He's lived in the United States since 1969, Dodgers fan, and he felt bad about it. So, people are learning the story of Fernando more and more online. The feedback I've had from my friends, my followers, or whatnot. I think that's a testament to the best art, journalism, whatever you want to call it. When even people who are fans, they say, "I learned something." Everyone learned something. I learned something from watching this, and just the connections of all of that. And then the other thing people are saying, okay, what's going to be the next great documentary that Eric's going to do? What's going to be the next sports thing? But that's the thing. And then, not to tie it all back to the LA Times, but we have to do it. It's important that the LA Times did this, because we do not have the best of track records when it comes to Latinos, when it comes to covering Latinos, or even from the newsroom, or boo us, or whatever you want to do.
That's fine.
So stories like this, I think, are important to show, everyone in Southern California and beyond, look, the LA Times of the past is the Times of the past, especially those of us in the newsroom. We are really trying to cover those stories that matter to the community. And even though this is a story that's 40 years old, it still resonates so much. And then you get the younger generation who, I don't know if they're seeing it on YouTube, but they're seeing it on TikTok. They're seeing the little clips there. They're like, then they'll go to YouTube,
Absolutely. We are getting a great reception. And that brings us to, just after this next segment, you'll get an opportunity to ask some questions. But I hope you take advantage of the opportunity to give us your feedback, to tell us what you think the stories are that you'd love to see us cover next, because we absolutely want to reflect our community, and you all have come out and helped us take that first step, and we hope to continue to build on it. So Eric, before we close out, is there anyone else on your team that you want to shout out or anyone else that you want to thank for their effort and their work? No pressure to like list them all. They're all in the credits.
I could.
But
John McCutcheon, Cody Long for the great graphics, Claire Collins for helping to shoot, Jessica Chen for helping to shoot, Steve Saldivar for helping to shoot.
I get a lot of questions every time about the artists in that opening.
Michael Fluellen, who's on staff at the LA Times.
Very good.
The inspiration for the opening animation came from an animated Doc Ellis documentary.
There's one Doc Ellis
and
fan.
I don't remember what it was.
Who's Doc Ellis, Eric?
Doc Ellis was a pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the documentary is about how he pitched a no-hitter while under the influence of LSD. And I love it was all animated, and I love the animation, and I reached out to Micah, who's a great illustrator, and I said, let's do that. And he toned it down, but it was still great.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for all your contributions, for bringing this to life, to bringing it to us. Coming up now, we're going to go ahead and play episode 6, which really takes a closer look at the impact Fernandomania had on Los Angeles, and then we'll be bringing up our next panel. Thank you.
Dodgers owner Walter O'Malley had a keen understanding of demographics. In Brooklyn, his teams were filled with players who looked like guys from the neighborhood. When he moved the Dodgers to Los Angeles in 1958, he knew that fielding stars that mirrored the city would be good for the community and for business.
It was always an idea to have the team reflect the community. It didn't start here. Probably had special nights, probably pre-game entertainment, probably printed a lot of things bilingual.
He knew that, and that's what he wanted to have really, really good players from Mexico.
It took 23 years, but the Dodgers finally had their Mexican star. On opening day in 1981, 20-year-old Fernando Valenzuela, the pride of Echoaquila, Mexico, threw a 5-hit shutout over the Houston Astros. But that was just the beginning. During his next 3 starts, all on the road, he allowed just 1 run over 27 innings, tossing 3 complete games and 2 shutouts. By the time Valenzuela returned to the Dodger Stadium mound on April 27, LA fans had become captivated by the rookie left-hander.
He does a tremendous job, and everybody just, wow, that's really amazing. And it was pretty much after that, you would think, this guy can't top that. Next time out, he tops that. Next time out, he keeps on topping, and everybody says, well, what's going on?
At that point, everybody started thinking, who is this guy? What is this guy? My gosh, he was only 20 years old. Just had incredible command. You didn't see this in great pitchers, not to mention, young guys like him.
For anybody, for any player, any athlete, I think when you have that people supporting you, you can feel more comfortable, more like, yeah, I can do it. I can do it for those people. They believe in me. When I go to the mound, I like to do them 100%. Like it was my last game, I'd go all the way.
He shut out the Astros. Then 4 days later, he came again. The way people reacted to that was unbelievable. Our audience increased so much. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. That's why I think that Fernando is a player that created more new baseball fans and Dodger fans than any other pitcher.
He was 8-0 with 5 shutouts and a 0.50 earned run average. But I mean, it was those first 8 games, they were just unbelievable. Just knock your eyes out.
By the end of April, the frenzy surrounding the pitcher even had its own name, Fernandomania.
I can tell you that I really became a Dodger fan when we saw Fernando. Certainly drove a lot of Latinos to the Dodgers. There was this pride in knowing that there was somebody who was born and raised in Mexico, by the way. He wasn't Mexican-American, and just was the sensation that he was.
Until Fernando, it was pretty much a white fan base. The fan base for Fernando was there because Fernando was a great player. But the fan base for the Dodgers remained well after Fernando and to this day.
This is sport, but it's entertainment for the fans, you know. And we and myself, I try to do my best so they can have a good game and good entertainment. To have a nice day in the park.
Latinos started coming to the stadium in droves to watch Valenzuela pitch, many rooting for the Dodgers for the first time.
I think people needed a reason to forgive the Dodgers for what they did in Chavez Ravine. And I think they found an excuse and a reason. So, okay, you know what, let's go back. Because after that, people started going to Dodger Stadium, started supporting the Dodgers. People that for years and years had refused to do it until they figured, okay, they've given this Chicano, Latino, Mexican a chance.
Fernando was really key in bringing the hearts and minds of La Raza back to the stadium, or to the stadium, really for the first time.
When Fernando came in, there was no doubt he was Mexican. I mean, he would even look up at God before he threw a ball. It became, you had to go to the game. And literally, when the police would stop you, if Fernando was playing, they wouldn't say, "What are you doing?" They go, "Why aren't you at the park?" You know, because you were doing something wrong if you weren't at the baseball park.
The first sort of like sports superhero comes to town, and he looks like somebody from the place back home. It's not just you as a kid sort of having something to identify to, an image, right? But it's my dad owning it. It's my neighborhood owning it. He also does not look like the traditional hero.
Yeah, he looked more like a wrestler. Honestly, you know, and he, like the average guy.
And people would laugh. My father laughed. My father said he looks just like a typical, you know, Mexicano.
You know, the average Mexican-American that comes and fixes your plumbing or, you know, puts a roof on your house.
He was pudgy. He was small. He was what they call gordito. You know, he was kind of fat.
He was a gordito, just like everybody else in East LA. He was somebody that everybody in East LA could relate to.
There's this sense that he is someone you really want to support and stand behind, because in many ways, he looks like he can't win. He's going to flip the whole script on what you've known or what you believe this sport to be.
We can't all be Nolan Ryan, but your kid can be Fernando Valenzuela.
On the nights Valenzuela pitched in 1981, Dodger Stadium just felt different, overtaken by a festive energy.
It was electric. There had never really been anything like that. Obviously, LA fans had seen, in earlier days, had seen Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale, but this was different. This was just kind of so wild and out of nowhere.
He was very popular, let's put it this way, all over the world. People were coming. We had friends who figured out in advance, unless there was a rain delay or a canceled game because of rain, when he would pitch 30 days out. Hey, Peter, do you have room, or can you get me 2 tickets for a game 30 days out? That was unusual. We had never had those requests before.
It was like watching the Pope. You know, it's like being in Venezuela when the Pope shows up. If they could have fit 1 million people into that stadium, there'd have been 1 million people there.
And it was full whenever he was on the mound. Whenever the inning was over and the Dodgers came to hit, it seems if they had to go on a beer run or use the restroom, they did it while the Dodgers were hitting because they didn't want to miss a thing regarding Fernando.
It was like an East LA backyard party.
When Fernando was pitching, was a sellout, no question about the Dodger Stadium. Then at home, I know that ladies, especially mothers and grandmothers, start praying and praying the rosary because Fernando was pitching that day. So he became God, really, in Southern California. It was unbelievable.
You felt like he was like a family member that you would go visit every 4 days at Dodger Stadium.
I remember my aunt, my tia Felipa, who loved the Dodgers and loved baseball, and she would always tune in to the Spanish language radio and then watch it on TV. She was so excited about Fernando. And I think that that's the same kind of sense and feeling that everyone had in the community. And they were proud that he was there. I mean, she was from Mexico. She had immigrated here, had all the, you know, the language issues initially. So she was very proud to see him there.
One thing about the Mexican people, when they have a hero, they will never give up on that hero. Even the good times and the bad times, they will always support him.
And, as Walter O'Malley predicted, having a star Mexican player did wonders for the team's bottom line.
I remember when I started doing the games at the Coliseum, the Latinos coming to the Coliseum was probably 8%, 10%. But later on, the number of Mexicans and Latinos coming to Dodger Stadium went up, up, up.
People were out there selling Fernando t-shirts before and after the game.
I think they were drawing about an extra 8,000 people a game with Fernando.
They started to hire Spanish-speaking ushers. They started bringing in Mexican-American food. So there was clearly a cultural shift that year.
And the passion for Valenzuela extended far beyond Chavez Ravine.
There's Mexicans everywhere in the United States began to come to the games to see Fernando. Ball clubs were talking about 5,000 to 10,000 extra walk-ups to whenever Fernando pitched. And people noticed that many of the people that were in line getting extra tickets were brown.
I noticed our ratings went from 0.3 to 7.8. It was unheard of that. And then it started, people calling from Mexico. We have to create a new network. We had 65 radio stations in Mexico alone, carrying the games to every corner of Mexico. Baseball became the #1 sport right away to many people. People from Mexico, from Central America, from South America, didn't care about baseball. But because of Fernando, they started learning the game. Mr. O'Malley would have enjoyed so much finally watching a Mexican Sandy Koufax playing for the Dodgers.
And again, whoop, here we go. Again, folks, on your ticket, QR code, pull out your phone. We'll take you directly to the entire series, Fernandomania at 40. I just cannot overstate really how extraordinary it is, all the different stories. And just to show you how, how vast the stories was and the influence of Fernandomania at 40, we're gonna do our final panel. Not a single person here, a former baseball player or anything associated with the sport, other than people who are fans and people who lived 1981. So first and foremost, I am going to introduce, how do I want to introduce them? Let's start, who had the first question actually? Boom, okay, I know who. Okay, we're gonna start off with theater. I'm trying to think of what words to use because there's so many ways to describe him, but he is 1/3 of the legendary Chicano troupe Culture Clash, and the only actual Chicano in Culture Clash I recently learned. The other two are Salvadoreños, which is absolutely awesome. So Culture Clash, of course, famously made a play based on what happened with the origin story of Dodger Stadium. Richard Montoya of Culture Clash, come on down. Wherever you want, wherever you want. There you go. So Richard's right there. Secondly, we're going to invite legendary Politica, longtime supervisor of Los Angeles, longtime just frankly chingona chicana of Los Angeles, Gloria Molina, come on up.
Her Majesty.
Legend in her own time, of course.
Her Majesty of the East Side.
Her Majesty of the East Side, that's what Richard said. And then an awesome historian, specifically sports in general, but boxing in particular. And boxing actually had something to do with Fernandomania, as we'll talk about in a bit and also see in the documentary. Gene Aguilera. Come on, Gene. Opening question for all of you, whoever wants to answer first, your memories of 1981.
I'll start off, I guess, I'm closer to you. 1981, Fernando fell out of the sky, just like from Mars, and just completely took over the East LA community. I remember this one time, it was right by where my grandmother lived, over there on 4th Street, that Fernando was at the Siete Mares, and he was having a party.
Legendary seafood restaurant.
Yes, and it seemed like within half an hour, the whole neighborhood was there. And I mean, the news, got news coverage, and Fernando was having his drinks in there, and it was a big story. But Fernando, every 4 days, he got me back to Chavez Ravine. I grew up with Sandy Koufax, Maury Wills, Duke Snyder. And then I kind of faded away. But when he came into the scene in 1981, I was there every 4 days. Bought my Fernando Valenzuela t-shirt that wore out, bought that several times, a jersey. But in East LA, you know, on top of the dresser in East LA, there's always La Virgen de Guadalupe, JFK, John F. Kennedy, and Fernando Valenzuela. Sainthood, you know, that's what he did for us.
That's your Holy Trinity right
there. That's what he did for us.
Well, you know, we have to remember the time, 1980. There was a very, very strong anti-immigrant sentiment that was going on. You had the, you know, speak only English or English only movement going on, and there was all of the politics, the anti-immigrant politics. But when Fernando came, that certainly, I mean, our community was really intimidated by what was going on all of the time. But when Fernando came, it just changed the entire landscape. There was a tremendous amount of pride. Es como que había llegado el tío. He had his own nickname, El Toro. And he was like having your uncle right there in your family. And he was proud of being an immigrant, proud of speaking Spanish, tremendous pride of where he was from. And that was the story of most immigrants that came into this country at that time. So it brought an abundance of pride. It really changed the whole landscape for Mexican Americans, who at that time, we were being hit upon big time. This was a pre-187, and the sentiment was very, very anti-immigrant at that time.
Yeah. For once, everyone was rooting for a Mexican.
That's right.
I mean, it's weird to say that, but it's absolutely true, because a Mexican was el más mejor de los más mejores, the best of the best of the best. That's Richard is from San Francisco. I had to do that.
What a handoff. What a handoff. I just have to say, with permission, that Culture Clash did a play here in the Montalban, and Zorro in Hell, and we got Ricardo Montalban to do our turn off your cell phone speech, right? And he couldn't have been more gracious, and we spent time with him, and he was a huge Dodger fan. He was a Jaime Jarrin fan, and recognized the value of Fernando, because we got to spend some time with Don Ricardo, and his announcement was, Damas y caballeros, por favor, at this time, please turn off your cell phones so that we can be undisturbed watching Los Cabrones de Culture Clash. And he wouldn't drop an F-bomb, but we got him to say cabrones, and then he said, so, y ahora sit back in your chair made of fine Corinthian leather. And enjoy the show. But I just, remembering and thinking all day today about Don Ricardo, what a gentleman he was, a throwback to an era. And I was saying to Gloria backstage, what an elegant man Jaime Jarrin is. You know, I got to meet him tonight for the first time. And Gloria says he always has been. You know, how important those moments are for us as Latinos, that we have scholarship and elegance and articulation. Because we seldom bring poetry to the inside of the chalk diamond. And for me, 81, even though we were in Sacramento, my dad was an academic up there, born in San Diego, but up there at that particular moment. My dad took me and my 5 brothers with burritos and bean sandwiches, and we saw Willie McCovey and Willie Mays at Candlestick. So the A's and the Giants are in your blood up there, and there's nothing wrong with seeing Willie McCovey's final game at Candlestick, and you're trying to hide your bean sandwich because your dad's not going to buy you hot dogs at Candlestick. But the seismic shift of watching Fernando, because as a kid, all you remember is that RFK being slain down the street was a milestone for Chicanos. Then Ruben Salazar being slain is a milestone. So everything coming out of LA was like, holy crap, horrific in a way, you know? And so here comes Fernando, and it's this life, this positivity, this good story that's coming out of an LA. And then I would move here 30 years ago and fall in love and raise my children here, and what normal people do. But I got to understand, as I wrote every single play with the boys, and as a solo playwright and as a filmmaker, really delving into the history of LA, you understand that exactly what you just said, Gustavo, people rooting for a Mexican and a town divided by an east-west axis, you know. And suddenly we were not focused on the west side. We were looking eastward.
and the West Side was in the background now. So that's very important in the baseball field, and what reminds us of who we are, and what's important in Chicano art, that we're not always trained on Europe and the West Side, that you know, these great Chicano artists put us in the foreground and not in the background, and Fernando radically shifts our focus. In a film town, we rack focus, and this beautiful Mexican man with the heart of a Mexican, and what used to be a Mexican town, which was a pejorative, but which I feel directors like Roman Polanski, if you watch Chinatown closely, he's very respectful to the Mexican town that it was. The kid on the slouching horse. John Huston's walking around that film like a haciendado, you know, for God's sakes. Spanish is spoken properly in that film. And Polanski's what? He's an immigrant. And he understands that, you know, in that regard. So I just love that fact, Gustavo and panel members, that Fernando radically shifts our focus in a very important way.
You know, you've had an entire career telling the stories of Chicano, Latino heroes, of icons in many ways. How would you classify Fernando in that pantheon? I mean, you talked about Zorro. You, of course, are familiar with the stories of Joaquin Murrieta and all these stories. Where does Fernando fit in?
You know, he's pitching fire. His blood turns blue. Lasorda starts speaking in Spanish, not well, but he's speaking in Spanish. Fernando's going to be an important, and look, there's many iterations of his story, but there's folks here tonight. I mean, where's the film on Fernando? So that likely will be the important cultural moment that Fernando can take his place, and we can tell that story of a man who walked from the motel on Sunset to go pitch that day. Maybe he had a six-pack, maybe he didn't, but this is the heart of a Mexicano. You know, Gustavo, and I was thinking today that for a Mexican, forever is not a long time, you know? But his ability to remain relevant and his endurance is something my dad used to talk a lot about the endurance runner. And it seems very poetic and very Mexican in a way, that he is beloved now more than ever.
Yeah.
So we've got to tell the younger generations about him. And good, bad, or indifferent, that's the language of the movies and TikTok and the things my kids watch.
Totally. Gloria, you know, one of the big things that we get to in this movie, or this documentary, but the Dodgers still don't really want to talk about, is the origin story of Dodger Stadium. The three barrios, Bishop, Palo Verde, and La Loma, that were kicked out. Of course, the Dodgers will say it's not our fault. They'll say it's point at the city of LA. But yourself, in your years as a politician, also an activist, and also a native of East LA, what is a story that politicians of today can learn from that dark moment in LA's past?
Well, it was very bittersweet because we remember when they dragged out those families, the big bulldozers that went in there. I mean, we were watching it. I mean, I remember Channel 5 had it live at that time, believe it or not. And those were very significant stories, but we didn't know the impact of it completely until you saw the Dodgers come in, and all of a sudden they laid out a red carpet for them. And, you know, Chicanos, they've always loved baseball. I mean, Dr. Santillan in his historical narrative talks about way back in the 30s and the 40s and how we had teams all the time. But the reality is that it was very bittersweet. Chavez Ravine is something that was painful. And there are still many, many families that have an unbelievable hostility about the Dodgers because they really felt they were betrayed by the Dodgers. They were betrayed by the city. And very frankly, they've never been apologized to. They've never gotten their land back or any money as it's going on now.
They can't even get a plaque.
At all. And so very frankly, there's families that are still will not go. I had a staff person and she would never go to a Dodger game. She was a very good friend of Bobby Castillo's mother. And I don't know if that family ever went to the game itself because they were part of the family. First they were moved out of Chavez Ravine over to Bunker Hill. But then they moved them from there. So they were being chased out of every single area. So it's very bittersweet for our community. And it's important to tell that story. I think we all love baseball. We all love Fernando. And of course, we love the Dodgers. But let's not forget those stories, because it was unfair treatment, and it's never been justified in any way whatsoever. And I think the Dodgers should apologize. I think the city of Los Angeles should apply. There should be some kind of effort to find those families and give them something back, because they gave us a lot.
Gene, in the documentary, we talk about how before Fernando, there was the Dodgers were desperate for some Latino to be able to get a fan base of the Mexican Americans. And, what was it? Walter O'Malley was saying, I need a Mexican Sandy Koufax. But what most people don't know is that Mexicans, we had our sporting heroes, and our holy grounds at that time was the Olympic Auditorium. So how did, and you talk about the significance of someone who retired in 1980, then all of a sudden Fernando popping up in 81. What was that?
The Olympic Auditorium, still there. The building is still there right off the 10 freeway, right in the shadows, and it's on the intersection of 18th and Grand. And that was the epicenter of boxing. The golden age of boxing in Los Angeles was 1940s to the end to 1980. That's where it kind of stopped. And the Olympic Auditorium was promoted by a lady named Eileen Eaton, and she was the only female boxing promoter in history, and to have weekly boxing functions. Well, actually, Wednesday she had wrestling. Every Thursday night she had boxing, and Friday night she had roller derby. So she was.
I can see you as a roller derby.
Yeah. So I grew up to boxing. I grew up to. I first got turned on to boxing through my first Mexican-American hero was Armando Ramos from Long Beach, the youngest man ever to win the lightweight title. But the Olympic Auditorium, I went there so many times. I saw everything. I learned about life at the Olympic Auditorium. Fights in the stands, betting, mafiosos, the catacombs there at the Olympic Auditorium, the dressing rooms where everybody would go. And it was just quite the experience growing up. And I eventually, I was the type of guy who would go to a boxing match. That's where I didn't go to very much wrestling or roller derby. But I would save the programs, I'd save the pictures. I'd rip off the posters that were on the telephone poles, the beautiful floating head posters. You guys familiar with those?
Oh, yeah.
And they're worth a lot of money now. I got them signed by, all the guys there. But the 70s was my era. And that's the era of Carlos Palomino, Armando Muñiz, Bobby Chacon, WBC featherweight champion, Danny Little Red Lopez, also a WBC featherweight champion, Alberto Davila, Frankie Duarte, and all those characters were just very central to me, and I was able to write a couple books out of that.
They're icons. They're icons for all Mexican Americans. Right. My uncles, my dad, they would go to the auditorium. But then 1980 happens, she retires. And
yeah, well, Eileen Eaton first started as building manager in 1942 at the Olympic Auditorium. Then she married Cal Eaton, who was the promoter at that time. So she just kind of took more and more. As Cal was getting drunk at the Bel Air Country Club, Eileen was there hitting it, 12 hours a day. And Eileen just built this place up into, like I said, it was the epicenter of LA boxing. Actually, in the United States, it really overtook the Madison Square Garden of New York. And so when Eileen retired in 1980 due to health and age, the Olympic was never the same after that, Gustavo. And that's where I just want to segue where Fernando came in at 1980, at the end of 1980, and then of 1981, of course, his glory season. But it really filled a void for us here in East LA.
Yeah, Fernando filled that vacuum that auditorium left.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
And I just want to say real quick, there's going to be a new documentary on the Olympic Auditorium called 18th and Grand. Be watching out for it, by producer-director Steve DeBro, sitting right there.
Easy plug, but totally awesome. we have some questions now from the audience, so I'm going to read them, and any of you who want to answer, por favor, please answer. So starting off, sometimes I really think the Dodgers organization could have done so much more to highlight and support Fernando after his retirement. What are your thoughts? So Richard, you want to start?
One can sense at times a strained relationship there. The recent bobblehead night was really interesting, and I thought your article really captured the dichotomy of the protesters that really chose that night to make their stand for not Chavez Ravine. I think there's time to, there's a lot of reconciliation that needs to go on, and dovetailing off what the supervisor was saying, that I think art and culture can help there. I don't know that the politicians can, but they won't hurt. I mean, Gil Cedillo was very helpful in switching into Vince Scully way, right? But I think that the artists and the playwrights and the poets and then the culture, whether it's film or not, can be helpful. I know people that claim to have been born on second base, their umbilical cords buried under the porches, on third base, and there's a few families that were. If you look at, you can overlay where some of the homes were, right? And you can picture and see them. The closest that they've gotten to the ballpark is our play, and that's, I'm very honored and yeah. I'm humbled by that. But I'm also a Dodger fan and love Fernando, a big time Dodger fan, right? So I want to see where can we bring the families in. Look, you're not going to end up with real estate up there, likely, but an apology, some sort of thing, some of the things that Gloria was mentioning might be super helpful. I don't know that Fernando needs an apology, but he needs full cooperation when we make the movie. And we were going to do Chavez Ravine inside the stadium. That's what my friend Jesse Nunez was going to do as a Dodger executive. And there's a couple other plays that deal with Juan and John by Roger Guenver Smith, Chavez Ravine. There's a Brooklyn side to the story of loss. Look, Walter O'Malley was an easy target, So we know people that don't like the O'Malleys, don't like Culture Clash, don't call it Chavez Ravine, We have tried to unpack the history carefully that talks about even the darker period before '59 in the late '40s when the housing debacle was going to be a Richard Neutra housing project. That goes south, Red Scare, communism. We've tried to unpack the history so carefully so that we're not just painting everything with the big brush. And I must invite everyone here to watch Chavez Ravine, our film experience that's coming to Center Theater Group platforms this Friday. Ooh. And we tell the story in 9 innings. And we get to slow stuff down, Gustavo, and really take our time with August 29th, 1970, for example. Jaime Jarrin leaves his booth after the day game, goes to cover the Chicano moratorium. East LA is embroiled in an anti-Vietnam protest. Ruben Salazar dies, other people die, and Jaime is back at his microphone that evening. That is courage of no other. So there's always been 2 LAs, right?
Yeah, I did not even know about that history about Jaime Jarrin being there at the Chicano moratorium until the LA Times, until we did a 50th anniversary package of the Chicano moratorium. And I remember reading that, I'm like, wow, if you cannot get more LA than Jaime Jarrin being there at the moratorium. It's absolutely amazing.
Gustavo,
really quickly,
can I just add to it? I really don't think that the Dodger organization has done enough with Fernando. Now, again, I don't know what his interest or whether, but he could have been an unbelievable ambassador with young people throughout Los Angeles. They could have made an investment of providing some kind of foundation money, supporting teams in the East Side. They've not really ever given much money ever to many of the East Side organizations and groups, but he could have played a very significant role and still can if he's interested. And I don't think the Dodger organization has made that investment sufficiently.
Yeah, kind of applause. Kind of on that note, then we won't bash the Dodgers anymore. Why is it, someone asked, Why is it that there are still detractors who do not agree with bringing up the quote-unquote dark history of Chavez Ravine? So I did a column recently about, there was 3 protesters on September 15th during a Dodgers game. They ran onto the field. 3 of them had the banners of the former barrios that were there on what was what is Dodger Stadium. So Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde. On the right field pavilion, the stand, big, huge banner rolls down, says not Chavez Ravine, because there's a website called Buried Under the Blue where they tell people, don't say not Chavez Ravine, name the barrios that were there. And so as, the father of one of the people was there, and he described, whenever people run onto the field, at first you're like, oh, hey, la, la, la. Then people started booing. And then people didn't want to hear the history. So why do you think, especially the Latinos, why do they not, some of them either don't want to hear the history or say, cool, that's cool history, that's sad history. Julio Urias just won 20 games, he should win the Cy Young Award.
Because they love baseball and they love the Dodgers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that history needs to be told. And I think that's true of all of our stories. We come from amazing stories, and that doesn't mean we're not going to be negative about what's going on. We're very positive about our future, our contributions, and who we are as a community. So come on, Latinos love the Dodgers, and they love going to the games. They pay those enormous amounts of dollars for a Dodger dog, parking and all that's involved, and the prices are going up all the time. But you see them all the time. They buy all the T-shirts and everything is going. They love the Dodgers, and we shouldn't take advantage of that, but it's a wonderful thing that they feel so strongly about it. But it's not bad to know about that history, because it was really an unfair history that shouldn't have happened. And there's nothing wrong with an apology from the Dodger organization or from the city council.
I think that we have to think about how we're going to deliver the story, frankly. I mean, getting people to read a newspaper article, that battle. I try to get people in theater, the battle. Go to a city council or a supervisor meeting, battle, right? Getting a book in a kid's hand, battle. Getting my kid to go play Little League of the Dodger field that they build in Lincoln Park, right? There's a few. There's a few. I'm not a Dodger apologist, and I'm not out to bash them either, but I think it's the way in which we deliver that history, Gustavo, and until it's a nine-part series on Netflix or Hulu or wherever that can be delivered, because it's totally interesting. It's totally film noir. It's Carrie McWilliams 101. It's Chinatown, meets your favorite film about Los Angeles, because it is a super dark period. And things are happening, money from Pasadena, power from Westwood, and the greater good and eminent domain, and who always loses when it's the greater good of a frickin' town. You want, five stories of a freeway? That's gonna go in the heart of East LA, A tunnel under Pasadena, what could go wrong? These things usually happen on the east side of any place, right? So it's going to be up to us to tell those stories, I believe. And how we tell them, we're gonna just need a little Hollywood magic and Chicano storytelling and Hispanic marketing and Latinx craziness, but I'm like you. I want the purity of the Chicano storytelling about a Mexican pitcher, and also the Chicanos, the Russians, the Jews, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Basques, the sheep herders that all lived in Chavez Ravine.
Final question for the night. Game 7, World Series, home against the Yankees. Who pitches? Fernando, Clayton, or Koufax?
Oh, Jesus. Wow.
They have to think. What?
Come on, you guys, help us.
Fernando, who else? It's Fernando's event, but I mean, well, let's talk about it.
You know what? Fernando in the '81 season, I mean, he started off 8-0. Everybody knows that. And then the strike hits, and it cuts off the middle third of the season. So, and then Fernando comes back, the baseball starts again, and he's not as dominant as he was, and he ends up going 13-7 in that 1981 season. Now you just think about this, Gustavo. If the strike never happened, maybe Fernando doesn't lose a game. That's just, that's a Cinderella story, but you never know. It's always a mystery, and I would love to ask Fernando, how that the strike impacted his momentum.
Yeah.
But he's one of the all-time greats in LA Dodger history and baseball history.
Hey, we're talking about folks at their peak, so we're getting Fernando 8-0. We're not getting the Clayton Kershaw that won one World Series as opposed to, well, that's a whole other thing. And Koufax, and of course Koufax is Koufax, but we're gonna give it to Fernando because this is Fernando's night. So that's exactly what it is. Final point, Richard.
Fernando connects us as citizens and as Angelinos. He reminded us outside of the baseball lines, you know, who we were. Sandy did that. Jackie did that, right? And those are the moments that are remarkable to us, that the games went on. After Watts riots, the games went on. On the night of August 29th, the games went on. We are reminded of the greaterness that we're, I don't know if that's a word, but the greatness
It's a good word.
of which we're capable. And in a town that the dividing lines can be somewhat invisible. We're not as divided as Chicago, right? But still, there were divided lines here. And Fernando melted a lot of that away. But as Gloria said earlier, our love of the game, Pinky Vargas played in the Negro League. So did many Mexican ball players. Black ball players winter leagued in Mexico, had families in Mexico. The Boyle Heights All-Stars in the early 1900s, an entire Caucasian team. So this is when we're at our most interesting, when the lines that divide us are blurred, and Fernando did that beautifully.
Gene, Gloria, Richard, thank you so much for being
Gustavo.
part of this panel. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to ESPN Deportes, Ileana, Chris, Kevin, our editor. Thank you so much. Again, folks, get that QR code. Go there. See the entire series. Fernandomania at 40. Pass it all around. Thank you so much, folks. Good night.
Thank you.
Música.
Thank you, LA Times.
Yeah.